I'm Kyle Kersey, Marketing Director at Space City. Since our founding in 1997, we have fostered critical conversations around architecture, design, art, and urbanism. We are so grateful to everyone who is here tonight. We can't do what we do without you all, so thank you. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce Kwong Von Glinow. Kwong Von Glinow is a Chicago-based architecture firm founded by Lapchi Kwong and Alison Von Glinow. Through their firm's avid curiosity and an optimistic approach, they have been able to innovate in the built environment across multiple building typologies, including housing, cultural, and institutional projects, finding new ways to balance creativity and practicality in the human experience. Their designs often challenge conventional ideas of space, using structure, materiality, in ways that feel both familiar and refreshingly unexpected. The ways we live, work, and interact in our built environment are constantly evolving, and yet architecture is slow to adapt. Kwong Von Glinow's work embraces change, questioning assumptions about housing, urban space, and the role of design in shaping contemporary life. Their practice demonstrates that there is room for rethinking traditional building types, for expanding spatial possibilities, and for reinterpreting how architecture serves our communities. Through thoughtful research, experimentation, and an openness to reinterpretation, their projects explore how spatial configurations evolve over time. They often work with existing building typologies, engaging in material explorations and design with a clarity that allows spaces to adapt while remaining rooted in strong architectural ideas. The work reflects an understanding that good design does not need to impose limitations. It should create opportunities. Kwong Von Glinow's portfolio ranges across multiple scales, embracing change within every facet of the built environment. Their innovative approach to design has been recognized with multiple awards, such as the Architectural League Prize, and being named amongst the top 50 architects and interior architects by A&N Interior, highlighting their commitment to redefining contemporary spaces and how we live. Now, we are thrilled to introduce Alison and Lapchi. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for Space City hosting the lecture, and thank you, Kyle, for working with us to organize this event. We are very thrilled to be here. And I'm extremely nervous and excited to be here since I'm from Seattle and I went to University of Washington, having a lot of my professors here, former colleagues and classmates. I'm very nervous, but hopefully we can present something. The lecture of the talk is called There Is Room, and it's quite open-ended. And we see there is a lot of opportunity. The mindset of us is for the opportunity is optimistic about the built environment. We see there is room to build in Chicago. There's literally have a lot of space still to build. Second is there is a room for appetite in the city of Chicago that people are still interested in design. The third is there is room for the design for topology to reinventing the old topology and see what we can learn from it and to come up with something new. And one thing we want to also acknowledge that we are very grateful for the team that we're working with, that all the work that we produce is with a team effort, and without them, it's not going to happen. And most of you might think, when you think about Chicago, you will think about all this really legacy building, the modernist building, the high-rise. But for a young practice, this is not the work that we are doing. We're not doing a 30-story tower here and there in downtown. And this picture is kind of showing the aerial view of Chicago, that you see the majority of the fabric of Chicago is not this high-rise. It's all this low-density building. We've come up with 5 different topology. It's quite important for city of Chicago, especially for housing. And we kind of take on the initiative to thinking about how can we think about, since we are not have the opportunity to do high-rise and tower, how can we kind of rethink about this low-density housing topology? And we did an exhibition last year called There Is Room. And this is the 5 really common topology in the city of Chicago fabric, from detached house, 2 flat, 3 flat, 3 flat plus commercial, and 6 flat. we take on the initiative to kind of rethink about all those topology in the smaller scale. We often refer those topology as the developer's dream because it's quite easy to build. The capital doesn't need to be so big because it's still manageable for a smaller investor, and the builder can have smaller crew that can be handled from single family to 6 flat. And the talk here, we kind of organized 4 different chapters. The first is overlooked building type. And we would love to show you this image by Thomas Struve. It's a really exciting image and a really good message for us as a young architect to think about things and not overlook things. And the interesting thing about this picture here is this famous photographer is photographing this audience looking at something, but not photographing what they are looking at. And what they are looking at is the Michelangelo David. When we Google searches, it's the most famous sculpture. The photographer, instead of photographing David, is photographing the audience. And so it's kind of reminding us that is there anything we overlooked? Is there something else that we should look at? It's not just the high rise or the tower. Is there something that for the low density, 6 flat, 3 flat, and single family to kind of we look at those elements? And here is a photo of yellow dandelion. You will probably not able to Google and find a yellow dandelions photographed by someone because they just walk on the street and see they like it. And if you really want a photo of the yellow dandelion, you have to pay like $6.99 to buy these images because all of us most likely will not see, oh, this is a beautiful dandelion, and let's take a photo of this. This is something that we always, at least for me, is overlooked for this kind of image. But we really fascinated by this artist called Tony Metelli. He literally make this yellow dandelion as a metal sculpture. In some way, it's kind of believable because yellow dandelion is very resilient. Maybe perhaps it can go under the baseboard, but there's something that we all overlook, at least for us, that he put the effort to make something that is very ordinary. And this is a lesson for us to kind of rethink about building types. When we get back from Switzerland and we move back to Chicago, where Alison from, we live in suburbia, and we kind of start questioning about suburbia and what happened there. And there's nothing wrong about this. Everyone loved it, and that's why people still building those kind of houses. And we bought like 4 or 5 books about this suburban house plan from Amazon, and we really want to understand what's the interesting about this. And it's quite interesting that people can look for a plan and maybe $1,000 or $1,500 can buy a plan. They kind of identify what kind of style, what kind of size, what kind of program that they need. And it's a really easy way to work for the client and suitable for the client's need. And we take on this interest, and we created this exhibition in Switzerland called Smuggling Architecture. We see the suburbia, those suburban houses have nothing wrong with it, but we see, is there any way to insert certain architecture element to those very generic houses? We see those houses that we kind of surveying 100 those plans from 1,000 square feet to 8,000 square feet. What we see the difference in plan is really based on the aggregation that if you want a big house, just add more rooms. And this is a couple examples about those plans. From your left side, believe or not, is the best-selling home plan in America. Then the second one is a 1,500 square feet. The one on the right is 2,000 square feet. The first house here, what I mentioned is the best-selling home plan in America. It kind of makes sense for a nuclear family that in a way the bedroom is on the opposite corner, that the owner's suite and the 2-bedroom is on the other side, so they have some privacy with the kid. And the garage is directly access to the kitchen that you can bring the grocery in once you offload the car, and then you can bring directly to the kitchens. And the kitchen dining and living is in the middle of the space. What we do here is we don't want to interrupt so much about the house, what we call smuggling architecture, that we create this envelope, a continuous hallway from one point to another point here. In a way that the result is quite interesting that we didn't change any room location, we didn't change the kitchen, living room, the size of those, but we create this visual corridor access from one end of the house to another end of the house. The question is this really necessary? The idea is we want to see is architecture have certain value that can provide it in this kind of very generic developer builder's home. And it's quite interesting to see the architecture start to kind of manipulating that some of the crown molding start to kind of work with these interventions as well. And here also you can see how the dining room wall kind of interacting with the living rooms. The second house here we're showing here is the plan is quite generic, but what we see there's a intrinsic kind of organization is quite interesting that the bedroom is in four quadrants. We were thinking that is there a way to kind of reinterpret this for a contemporary living? Instead of thinking this as a single family house, we're thinking this could be a co-living space that they have three quadrants that have three bedroom suite that is kind of in between, have this living room and kitchen and room in the middle. What the result is what's the result in between here is the public space is between all the quadrants of the bedroom suite. The last house here, what we're interested about here is all the angle wall, and we found it's quite interesting that the builders have decided to put all these angles wall here, but we find that there's a lot of redundancy on the circulation and the hallway. We were thinking about, is there a way to reduce those elements that we inserted what we call the ante-room. The ante-room is basically a waiting room. Instead of having hallway connecting one room to another room, we inserted ante-room that between certain type of rooms, so you have to go from one room to another room to the next room. The result is quite interesting that you kind of start to see that one big space and then one smaller space and one big space, that the hierarchy of the house is become more clear in a way that perhaps that for a dweller, sometimes they can have their own space within the rooms.
Then the next project we're going to show is called Chicago, because it's located on Chicago Avenue, but it's a 3-flat typology with ground floor commercial underneath. And we want to start out by looking at the Radford Architectural Company brochure. This is a manual for home builders to start to build these 2 to 3 to 6 flat typologies throughout Chicago. And it was made in the early 1900s as a very affordable, simple way to construct a building. And so when we started out with this project, we wanted to survey 100 3-flats throughout Chicago to understand how has this typology developed over the last 100 years. And what's really interesting we found is that there's really only 3 types, regardless of when the 3-flat was built, but they're either bedrooms at the front of the 3-flat, bedrooms at the back of the 3-flat, or bedrooms in the middle with living and dining split on either side. At the same time, when we look at the facades of 100 3-flats throughout Chicago, we can see that the development of the facade has changed, but it's still newer or more contemporary facades are still looking to reinterpret historic facades, but not really trying to claim a new look for this building. And we kind of see a reason for this as driven by the market. The typology is so clear and succinct that it makes for a very standardized way to assess value, and that's through comparisons or comps. And so if you're looking at a Zillow reading of an apartment building, you'll see that it's kind of evaluating square footage or appliances or finishes, but it's not really assessing quality of light or space. So there's been very little development in the kind of spatial qualities of the 3-flat. So this building is located on Chicago Avenue as an in-between lot, a party wall on one side and a little bit of an alleyway on the other side. And it's adjacent to two existing 3 flats on either side. On the left side, you can see the more kind of historic looking 3 flat, and on the right side, the more contemporary, but still it's borrowing from that historic 3 flat. And when we were developing our proposal for the 3 flat, we really wanted to have a facade that was not ornamental or not trying to look back at history, but really to clarify the typology. And so we articulated the 3 individual units by stepping back the building facade at each level. And then within the building, we made 3 larger building scale architectural moves. The first is to connect the front and back of the building. In typical 3 flats, when you go up in a building, you're either choosing the front stairwell or the back stairwell, but you're never able to kind of go from front to back at the ground floor. And so we wanted to create a continuous passage to allow people to move from either side. So this brings residents or those in the commercial suite to be able to go from either side, from front to back. And then the next building scale move was to create a 3-story open courtyard in the dwelling units to bring light and air into the deepest part of the unit. So at the kitchen and at the living room, light can come in deep into the unit. And then finally, at the basement level or ground floor level, we created a double height space. So at the street front, you can look down into a workshop area. For the residential unit, we kept to a similar typology where bedrooms are at the front and living and dining are at the back, but we centralized the core and made an active hallway where we have all of the wet areas of the home. So the vanities are open, so it's an active hallway, but not a closed off hallway. And then from the dining room, you can look out to downtown Chicago through the courtyard that's been cut. And then in the living room, it almost acts like a small tower with light on both sides coming in. And then a view back to the kitchen, through the wet spaces, and to the front bedroom looking out to the street of Chicago. Then the next typology is a 6 flat with 2 courtyards. This is really simply a 3 flat that's either been doubled or mirrored. We did another survey of 106 flats throughout Chicago, and to our surprise, found that it looked exactly like the 3 flat. It was only just twice as big and side by side. So you either get the mirror of the apartment or the double, just a copy of the apartment. But what we found so interesting is that with a 6 flat, you're working with a 50-foot wide lot. So rather than consider a unit that is long and narrow, we wanted to work with this amazing new lot opportunity, which is 50-foot wide. So instead of stacking the apartments side by side, we wanted to stack them front and back and make use of the largest width of the site and introduce more ways to bring light and air into the apartment unit. At the same time, we wanted the actual appearance of the building to fit in with its context, so to still look like a 6 flat or look like a 3 flat. And so we have these kind of 2 towers at the front looking like individual 3 flats, or it also could be read as a 6 flat. And then we centralized the core here where there's the least amount of light, put all the living spaces next to the core, and introduced a 25-foot long glazing window to bring light into the living areas, but then it is interior to a courtyard, so there's still some privacy in this area. One side of the courtyard is curved and the other side is angled, and it gives some privacy to the most public space of the home, but also allows views out to the street front.
The second topic that we interested is called leftover circulation space. As what Alison mentioned, from the 3 flat and 6 flat, there's always a consideration about corridor and hallway, but those is not really a valuable space in a way that you don't charge people to use the hallway. So a lot of our project, we kind of think about how can we exaggerate the hallway or make the hallway a little bit bigger, that able to use that we can call something else instead of hallway. And this is the our first build project. It's called the Ardmore House. It's along the access alleyway in a way that for an access alleyway, it's not a really ideal lot for most of the people because a lot of garbage truck, recycle truck coming in daily, coming across the access alleyway, a lot of car driving in and out to the garage. So it's a really public kind of space in this lot. And a lot of time people concerned about the privacy within, but we found that this is amazing because they will have a 56-foot long wide facade that is facing that will have a lot of light coming in. And we find this quite interesting. And in a way that we kind of flip the program, instead of putting the typical program living room, kitchen, dining room on the first floor with bigger windows that's seeing the access alleyway, we put all those programs on level 2. But then we put all the private program like bedroom, bathroom to be on the level 1, but the window is facing the neighbors' buildings. What we're trying to do here, we create this on the bottom is the access alleyway. We're trying to push all the program away from the access alleyway. What we call here is called the interior courtyard. That is just big enough that we can call it a courtyard. That the widest part is 6 foot wide and the narrowest part is 3 foot. And here is a little video that's showing that within the interior courtyard, we have the mudroom, the first bedroom, some bookshelf, an opening going up to stair, level 2, a 6 foot wide place for like reading nook or coffee, and then the second bedroom, a reading nook, and the third bedroom, and then the entrance vestibule. So we want to try to make these hallways as active as possible that we can call it an interior courtyard. And the result of this here is on the left side of this solid wall there is the access area, so it's quite private for the residents. And this interior courtyard creates this kind of amenity to more than function just walking from point A to point A and point B. And also that is double height space to have the connection to the level above. On the level 2 is the stick frame here is a 56-foot long clear story window that bring light and air to the courtyard and also level 2. The level 2 plan is quite open. And this is our daughter here looking at our model. She was 2 years old when the model was built. And we make a lot of model in our office and she has been enjoying that. Yeah. And the plan of level 2 is quite simple. It's an open space with the interior courtyard double height space. This is the video. It's showing that from the dining room, we have 4 trusses separate the space, then the kitchen island, then the dining room, and another set of truss, the powder room, then the living room. Between the truss have skylight, between the truss to have natural light coming down from the roof. And the final result here is quite similar to the model. One aspect we want to point out here is the triangle is not touching at the column and the beam. We kind of purposely lift the triangle a little bit higher to at least have a 7'6" clearance from the open space. But we also really like the effect because normally in the structure you will probably want to the bottom core tie with the beam above. But we find that this triangle is read as a structure, but although it's just read as a geometry, that is just a pure triangle. That is this structure or is that not structure? It's structure, but it's kind of a reading that is not a structure. And we really like the result of this, and the light is between the truss. And what's nice about, what we think is nice about this is this kind of curved interior courtyard. Even though the 56-foot long clear story is quite open, but because of the program, it's kind of pushing in by this kind of curved kind of courtyard. So it still gives a lot of privacy for the house. And when we was coming back to Chicago doing our first project, we really want to do something that is really typical in Chicago. And the Chicago balloon frame is invented in Chicago, meaning that is the wall is building from level 1 to level 2 without separation of the floor like a tier-up wall. So we have this 4 PSL member that is running from the ground floor to the roof. And the module is quite simple. It's 16-inch on center, so all the window is 48 inches wide. So it's a really standard of building this house. And on the other side is just a tier-up construction with the floor separations. And when we first were thinking about the facade of the building, as a lot of architects, including us, we want to do a black house, and it's pretty obvious that that's the first attempt we want to go. But we feel that it seems a little bit kind of monolithic. It seems like maybe the access alleyway the massing is a little bit too tall by just a monolithic black house. One day after dinner, we drove back home and saw my favorite car that architect us cannot afford, the Range Rover. But this is 5 years ago, 6 years ago, it's already $230,000. But what's interesting about this car is a really big car. But when they first come out of this car with this two-tone color, we found it extremely interesting. Why a really big car to have the top is black and the bottom is gray? And I got so excited. And then we photoshopped this house to be black on top and gray on the bottom. And that evening, we sent this Photoshop picture with the Range Rover to my brother, which he is also here. And in the morning, he sent me back this photo saying the Mark Rocco, the black on gray. He told us that we shouldn't never talk about the Range Rover. We should talk about the Mark Rocco. And we found it's really interesting that he's an engineer with architect, but the dialogue is how we can able to reinterpret or we talk about this thing in a really different angle. And I find it's very fascinating to have this kind of discussions. So the outcome is this, and we enjoy this kind of black on gray. Yeah. Oh. The next project is 3 flat without a corridor. And this is the project that we are trying to do a apartment building that is no hallway, no corridor. All the stair is on the outside of the buildings. And what Alison have also showed, this 3 flat here, we kind of very bothered by all this kind of not usable corridors. Especially in Chicago, the lot is quite narrow. It's 25 foot wide, 125 foot long. So the corridor is not easy to get rid of. And we want to see, is there any chance to do a house without any corridor? And we learned from the best that this is one of the best buildings in Chicago, the Enan Steel building, and it's extremely radical. It's one building, but 2 towers. That one tower is literally just foreplay, it's open foreplay, but one tower is with elevator, stair, and MEP core. We found it's extremely interesting that how can we distribute kind of program to create these conditions here. And we also trying to learn from what we did in the Ardmore house, that with the interior courtyard, we see there's a possibility to do a really long living rooms. And the outcome is we able to kind of shuffle some of the wall to create different pocket that is a little bit deep enough to create moment that for a living room, for a kitchen and dining room across the whole width of the building, and 2 bedroom on either side. And the circulation is on just either side of the buildings. And the outcome of the model here is showing that it's quite clear of the division that on the bottom half is the living space, on the top half is the bedroom, bathroom, and part of the kitchen space. And it's a really simple way of building this. This is nothing very uncommon. It's a stick frame building with masonry on the outside. And here the model is showing we really enjoy this kind of long living space that with different pockets from ancient vestibule, the living room, the kitchen with a full width of the building, to a reading nook, and to the bookshelf and storage, and the mudrooms. And here is showing the 3 really long, 50-foot long living rooms. And this is a model shot showing from the mudroom all the way to the end of the space that also serves as circulation as well. The kitchen area that is allowed to span across the entire length or width of the apartments.
So then we use this idea one more time. But on a very different project type. So this is our first institutional project that we worked on, which is for the School of the Art Institute of Chicago library renovation. And it's a 2-floor renovation that was required. The 5th floor was last renovated in the 1980s, and then the 6th floor was done in the early 2000s, but both of them were siloed from each other. On the 5th floor, this is the original plan of the 5th floor, you can see this meandering corridor, and there was only one student serving space here, which is the Special Collections Reading Room, where students would come and get to actually experience interacting with special collection objects. And the librarians' offices were in this isolated area, and some of the special collection stacks were over here. But all of these had opaque walls, and students really had no visibility to come to this really important space in the school. So again, we learned from previous projects about considering bringing in a sweeping corridor space, what we call the Corridor Plus, and to give nooks into this space with this sawtooth storefront system. And all of these storefronts allow visibility into the program below it. So we created a librarian hub where all of the librarians could be seen and the important work that they're doing. The reading room was very visible, and students were now able to have access to it more easily, and then the special collections and main collections at the back end. And then we wanted to create a connection up to level 6 from level 5. And we were really interested in how could we do that efficiently without taking up too much space, and also cost effectively without creating too much structural change in this steel frame building. So when we looked at the historic plans, we were very excited to see the layout of the beams were 5 feet apart from each other, a good width to bring in a staircase, and also enough visibility to bring an atrium to see down into level 5 from level 6. So we talked with our structural engineer, and he agreed that it would be fine if we actually excavated an entire length of the building between the steel beams, and the steel structure would still remain totally intact. And all we needed to do was to take away the typical clay tile arch that's between these beams. And we thought this could be quite interesting as a way to encourage people to look down, to see down. Most students will access level 6 to see all of the collection, the main collection, but to get them down to level 5 to see the special collection was maybe kind of needed to be more encouraged. And so we were excited by looking at some references of Dora Salcedo and how maybe even just a small crack could encourage students to come down to level 5 to visit special collections. So this is a construction photo up on level 6 to see the clay tile arch between the beams. And then up above, once it was cut out, this long atrium up to level 6. And then on level 6, our scope was really to create this access up to level 6 and match the finishes of level 5. And so the result was to create this open corridor space on level 5 that looked up to the main collection above. And you can see how the elevator lobbies connect to each other now. And then once you get off the elevator at level 5, you can see all of the different programs that are available to go to. So from the librarian hub all the way to the special collections. And up above, we had a spanning polka dot pattern that allowed air through here, and this concealed all of our transfer ducts for the mechanical system. From one side of the sweeping hallway, it's very visible to see into the program. And then on the other side, it created these more semi-private nooks as reading spaces for students. And then up on level 6, there's a curiosity to be able to look down to level 5, and then the visibility to see the space below. And so the next set of projects we want to show are about uncovering found space within existing spaces. As a young practice, most of the projects we work on are not new build, full-on construction projects, but really renovations of existing spaces. And we're very happy to be able to work on some of these spaces. And the goal that we always try to approach these projects with is how can we find space within this existing building? So we were asked by a client to consider how to live in a very large home outside of Chicago. It's a home built by Howard Van Dorenshaw, who's an architect from the early 1900s, who designed a lot of large estate homes. And this is an 18,000 square foot home that he asked us to reconsider for him and his family's contemporary life and their art collection. And so Howard Van Dorenshaw, he's a pretty well-known Chicago suburban architect, and he was kind of known as being the most radical of the conservative architects, and he's known for these double pitch roofs throughout his homes. And the project is really on a very large estate. This is the 1915 home by Howard Van Dorenshaw, and then there were 3 additions, 2 in the 1960s, a cabana, and then in the 1980s, there was a garage that was added. When the client asked us to work on this project, he said he wanted us to keep everything that was original Howard Van Dorenshaw, but make it for contemporary life, but any of the additions that had been put on throughout the ages to remove those and add a 2020s contemporary lifestyle to them. Except for the cabana, we kept that. So this house is landmarked in the state of Illinois, and it was required to keep all front-facing facades intact or refurbished. So our scope within the front of the facade was really to refurbish all of the windows and woodwork, except we were able to get away with one kind of contemporary element, which is at the groin vault to line the top arch of this vaulted space with a continuous 27-foot long linear light. And this, we really wanted to kind of have this connection between this very historic space and a contemporary way of lighting this space. Then throughout the home, it's a very large home, and we needed to come up with a concept for how we could kind of work with all of these spaces and bring a contemporary lifestyle to them, but at the same time be respectful of this historical heritage of this original building. So the way we worked through the building was to consider charms within each of the different locations on each floor. So we'll talk about a couple select areas. The first are the new additions that we put on, which is a 4-car garage and a foyer. And we wanted the new additions to stand in stark contrast to the original historic home. And so we also wanted the shape to be very monolithic. And so we chose a black stained Akoya wood to clad the entire garage with so that its form was very consistent and differentiated from the original building. As art collectors, we really wanted this to be seen as the first gallery of the home so that when they come home, they park in this garage and it's this first gallery. The space interior volume matches the exterior volume as well as this vaulted space with natural light coming in. Then beyond is the foyer. Our original proposal for the foyer was to create a vaulted space, a fully barrel vaulted space. And when we were talking with our historic preservation officer, he dismissed this and said that this is too formal and could not be used next to the historic home. So we put a hat on it to cover that up and kept that original barrel vault idea for the interior of the space to reference the original drop-off area. And then that barrel vault is cut into to enter the historic home. Then on the first floor, we'll talk about two different areas of the home, but as such a large home, we divided the spaces between where the family would actually live and then where their art collection would be. An 18,000 square foot home is clearly more than any family would need. And so it was really about how to make the space useful for a family, but at the same time be able to give breathing room for their art collection. So the spaces of living for the family was actually quite, not minimal, but partitioned off from the whole home. And so there's this living area with kitchen and then art space at the plan left of the home. So we'll start with that area, and this is in the most historic area of the home. This is right adjacent to the arch drop-off area, and we call this the garden gallery. Adjacent to it is the ravine gallery and then the office space. So from the entranceway, we can see into the garden gallery, and our work here was really to restore the original layout of Howard Van Dorenshaw's plan here. In the 1960s, 2 columns had been removed to have a large opening here, and we wanted to bring back this kind of historical order to the space, but we cladded those columns in mirror polish chrome, so they reflect the same columns on the left side of the space. And here, this is built. So these are new photographs we've just received, and the clients are moving in. And from the outside, you can see this mirror polish chrome reflecting the environment on the exterior. And then as you walk from the garden gallery into the ravine gallery, we painted this entire space black because it's overlooking the ravine, and we really wanted the view out into the ravine to be very prominent. It's a very special space. This was during construction right after a 16-foot long by 10-foot tall window had been put in to look out into the ravine. So the space is very focused on the exterior, and then the artwork and the collection that will be put in here will also be very prominent in the black space. And then finally, Howard Van Dorenshaw designed all of these spaces that are kind of at the ends of the home as porches. These were not enclosed before, but these were open air porches, and we enclosed this space as the future office of the owners. And then on the other side of the house, this is the living space where there's the kitchen, the prep kitchen, and the dining room. For the dining room, the client asked us to design the dining room table itself. They said they didn't want to have the traditional long Thanksgiving dining room table that they only sit at once a year, but they wanted to have something more functional and flexible that they could use in different ways throughout the year. So we thought about that and looked back at an early competition project of ours where we designed an apartment building based off of a tabletop, different size tabletops, so a circular tabletop, a square tabletop, and a rectangular tabletop. And these could function in different ways to come together to allow light and air, but also give a lot of flexibility to the unit types. And so we borrowed this idea, but actually at the scale of the table, and gave a lot of flexibility for this family for how they could use this dining room. So this is a mock-up that we made, and the table is being fabricated now. But there are many iterations for how this table could be used throughout the time in the home. And then this is an image of how all of the spaces we were designing, we wanted to be able to connect them to the entire home. So there's an enfilade that we cut through the entire home, so you can see from the ravine gallery all the way into the prep kitchen. And then upstairs, we'll talk about the owner's suite on this side of the home. What we did with this space was reconsider where the clients wanted to spend their time in the house. Most people would think maybe we should create a really large, grand bedroom, but we talked about where are you really spending your time when you're awake, and it's not in the bedroom, it's when you're getting ready or when you're going to bed. And so we kind of flipped where you would normally put the bed. We put the bed out on the porch and then focused on the lounge programs to make a really grand space for them there. And we vaulted the ceiling in the lounge space and removed the third floor rafters that were there and implemented new structure in there. So when you enter the owner's suite, you go down a long hallway and then see plaster on the wall that matches the same exterior plaster. So we wanted this to almost be like an exterior environment on the inside. And then lastly, in the basement, we'll just show one area, which was the bomb shelter, where we cored a flower pattern into this to bring light down into this very kind of moody gallery that they will have here. And then the cabana at the back of the house, we wanted to emphasize this original 1960s structure, which is quite interesting. There are precast concrete panels for the roof, and we wanted to kind of feel that heaviness of the roof and the lightness of the wood frame below it. So we painted all of the wood yellow so that it appeared even lighter than it was.
The next project is called the Art Outpost. It's the same client with the art collector clients. It's a very interesting project that the location of the gravestone is close to the United Center where Chicago Bulls, the basketball team, play. And they have a really beautiful view from the rooftop looking at the downtown of Chicago. And initially, the client, when they reached out to us, they were thinking that it's their city home, but also become an artist residency that they can support their artists. And typically, it's quite typical for a 2.5 building gravestone that on the backside is quite easy to make an addition to it. So we create a new addition to it. The first thing they asked us, they want the biggest roof deck possible for this house, and we kind of keep all the zoning requirements after the offset. This is the biggest roof deck we can provide to him. And we rotated the roof deck 10 degrees that sent to the city downtown of Chicago. And we created a couple walls, one wall, one storage, and one column to support the roof deck. And the back half is where the MEP is stored to locate. And with the rooftop, and then the shed deck connecting the level to the rooftop. The idea of this is become an artist residency that the artist can actually make art, show art there. If no artist is doing it, the family could there on the weekend or while they're in the city. The in the beginning of the room, on the room is black. It's a black vestibule. It's almost like you're inside a crate that is a very dark room, while you're going through this dark room to go to this existing stair, and then the last is this new stair, as a solid plywood stair going up to the rooftop. It's an original gravestone, so it's a very domestic setting. The first thing we did is to try to stain the whole entire floor to be dark green, to give an institution feeling to it. The second thing we did is to open up this living room and dining room area to be bigger space to showing art. And the kitchen and the bedroom is on either side of the building. And this is the image showing this long space that have allowed to show art in this space. On the upper floor here, this is the owner's suite, also served as an artist residency where the artist will stay. In the middle is the library, and then on the left side is a flexible space that either for the family as a family room, or when the artists can do art and show their art in this space. The image here is showing that the potential the artist setting up the show here that have enough wall to show the art and also a space to make the art. And this is the view from the rooftop looking at the downtown Chicago. And this building is permitted, and hopefully we can start construction in the spring.
The next project we want to show is a renovation of Rice University MD Anderson Hall. This is a project that's had several additions over its lifetime. The first was a 1947 building by Rather and Stubbs. And then in 1981, there was an addition by James Sterling and Michael Wolford. And then completed last year is the new Kennedy Hall addition by Kara McQuo, Swiss architects. And Rice University, the School of Architecture, is in a very interesting location on a campus. It's actually located on the quad. It's in this upper left-hand corner here. And we found this quote very interesting by Philip Johnson, saying that I came to see Jim Sterling's building but couldn't find it. I think this could be taken as a sarcastic comment, but at the same time, we find it a great compliment. The way how James Sterling was able to really seamlessly integrate his addition with the existing building. And so we found that as like a great challenge to try to take on with this project, working with a Pritzker Prize Architects building, which we were very nervous to do. So we spent a lot of time analyzing the original building plan of this James Sterling addition. Our scope of work is to be in this area here on the first and second floor. And so we became very interested in this spine that James Sterling created to create this original wing and then his new addition wing with this new semicircular spine that's introduced and this angled wall that really acts as like a miter of the two buildings coming together. And so that there's this mitered wall here, which he really celebrates at the most focal point of the school where all of the school's events and lectures take place. And he celebrated the original structure of Rather and Stubbs' structural element protruding from his angled mitered wall. So we found it very fascinating to see how important this axis is for the school and this angled wall was for informing the type of spaces and activities that could happen in this large atrium space here. So for us, on the other side of that wall, we wanted to really consider this angled wall and have a relationship to it in both of the areas that we were renovating. So this top area here is what has become the student forum for the school, and the lower level right off of the quad is the welcome center. So for the RFP, the school wasn't exactly sure what they were looking for when we did the RFP, but we knew we wanted to connect the school to the quad, and we were very excited about this potential space right at the corner. And we proposed opening up what was a brick wall facing the quad and opening it up to really connect the school onto the quad. And so as it's built now, it just completed last semester, there's a large opening off of the quad to see into this welcome center here. And then we introduced a curving interior facade for the 4 offices that we made that responds to the original center point of James Sterling's atrium. So this circular form here responds to the center point here, and this curve here intersects the original center point of James Sterling's atrium. And from here, there's a large opening into the welcome center where there's then visibility to the offices beyond. With this large 24-foot wide opening that we created, we needed to insert a column in order to hold up the beam above. And we clad this with a mirror polish chrome to reflect its surrounding, and also the circular form to kind of have a second reconsideration of Sterling's infamous west facade of the school. And so this column aligns with the arcade within it. And then once you're inside this arcade, you have a great visibility into the area beyond of the Welcome Center, into the 4 offices that are there. The curve invites students into the space and also gives them visibility of who they can see within the space. And again, connects them back out to the school or to the courtyard or to the quad. And then upstairs, this is the connection to the new Kennedy Hall by Karen McQuo. There's a big height difference of 3 feet between the 2 buildings, so we needed to consider how to accessibly bring students up. So we introduced a large walking ramp at 1 to 20 up here along the back side of James Sterling's atrium, and then we created a student forum space. When we talked with students, when we started this project, we were interested in what spaces was the school missing, and they said they wanted a space that was not in their studio, but a space where they could kind of have casual conversations with friends or maybe have lunch outside of their studio space, and also maybe have a space just to meet as a large group of students. So we created this student forum, and we created some jutting spaces within this otherwise circular area to create more defined pockets and more intimate pockets for students to gather in. So this is an image of the walking ramp around the James Sterling atrium, and then this is the stairway coming from Kennedy Hall down into the student forum. The space was really a space of negotiation between the two buildings coming together, that we needed to have height clearance for this otherwise taller building coming in from Kennedy Hall, and also meet the lower end of Anderson Hall. And so these different pockets within the space allow for different social settings within the student forum.
The last chapter is called Borrowing the Familiar. And next week, we will have our exhibition of our 8 years of work. We are showing 40 model of our practice. And some of the project here you probably seen already. And you probably see that we're using the same trick more than once usually. And a lot of time, there's a lot of circles, some triangle, some square. But the idea is we want to find a way to able to communicate design. That design is, for us, is not very complex thing, but it's a conversation that is easy for us to with the team, easy for us with the client. That is a collaboration that from on our end is not just we give them a design, but everything here is come with the team and also with the client to come up with the project. And we find that it's very easy for us to use a very simple and primary geometry to kind of work with those spaces. And surprisingly, a lot of time, there's a lot unexpected result by kind of working with those very simple form and geometries. And maybe a couple projects here will kind of show more clearly what we mean by that. And this, we're really lucky to get this project. It's a estate about 1 hour away from Chicago, west side of the Chicago. And there's an existing house here. The client is a Ferrari car collector that we are doing a 10-car garage for him, and also a greenhouse. And it's a really beautiful landscape here. It's surrounded by farmland. We want to create a structure of the car parking, and the greenhouse is kind of relevant and able to situate well in the site. And we borrow a lot of kind of familiar element and structure element of the farm structure, like the silo, the barn, the gable roof, the multiple gable roof. Those kind of elements become the criteria for our design. And this is the 10-car garage that you can see. There's a extruded long kind of barn structure with a silo, with a triangle opening. And the structure here is a 10-car garage, but instead of having one big volume, we kind of separated to two volumes to give it a little bit just better scale for the site. On one hand, you can see this structure that is almost like straight, but then is a very slightly curved that kind of enhance the experience that you're viewing the car, that you can see from one end, you can see at the other end of all the car in perspective. And the element on the back is the silo that intersect with the barn and with the shed that is a counter for the client. In here, we want to kind of emphasize each element very clearly. The roof is a roof, that under the roof, we have a triangle glass that kind of able to see through the underside of the roof all the way to the end. And you can see also the triangle kind of break into the two volume. We kind of define this triangle is kind of a little bit mysterious, but at the same time, this triangle kind of emphasizing it's just a pass-through space from one end to another end. And then the silo is just attached on the side. So on the long view here, you can see that it's a really long structure. It's 120-foot long structure in two volumes. It's with one roof connecting together. On one view here, this look like a really gentle curve. The wood here is also the same. It's using Accoya wood as a windscreen. The roof is the same roof, and the silo here is a kind of is a storage room and a sitting room for the client. And here, what unexpected is when the silo intersecting with the gable roof, this creates this really unexpected result of the intersection to create this really beautiful opening to enter the silo. And on the inside here, because of this really gentle curve, you start to see this, when you're looking at the ceiling, you see on the top of the roof, you see this curve kind of trace you over all the way to the length of the garage. And the silo here at the pass-through space, the triangle space, is to separate the two buildings with two moon gate door in between. The next structure here is the greenhouse. It's a very simple form. It's a triangle extrusion. And first, we want to sunken the greenhouse 42 inches up below grade, because that's where the Chicago frost line is, that we sunk everything 42 inches. But the effect is quite nice, that when you stand on the greenhouse, you actually in the eye height with the landscape surrounding you. And the structure is actually quite logical for the greenhouse too, that we give the widest space at the bottom for the greenhouse to plant, but also that we can have pulling cold air in and then hot air out at the tip on the top of the structure.
Then the last project we want to show tonight is a house that we designed 3 times for 3 different clients, and it's still not getting built. And so it's sort of about how a small project or a small practice works. But we thought it's a nice project to end on. And we call this house Some of This, Some of That. And it really started with our first commission project was to reconsider an apartment interior and how to consolidate all the many storage that needs to fit into a rather small apartment in Hong Kong. And so the design of that was to reconsider a spatial organization to connect all of the spaces of the home to one object. And so this became what we called the storage T and contained all the storage of the apartment. So we reused this idea for a larger countryside home. This was our first attempt for a competition project that we didn't win, but this was, sorry?
Clad in metal.
Yeah, clad in metal. Then a second iteration of this project was for a very different climate where we were using rammed earth and were able to get to the final phase of a competition and won. So this was a good luck charm, but this was not the final scheme that won. And then finally, a friend of ours asked for a design for an estate in upstate New York, but she ended up buying an existing house. So this is still a project that we love the spatial qualities of, but haven't yet gotten to build it, but we hope there's a 4th life for it. And so the idea of this home was to work with a gradual landscape in this countryside in upstate New York. And so as the contour of the land moves up, so too does the ground floor within the building. So the floor is subdivided and each of the rooms are at different elevations. Within the home, the storage Ts are organized so that there's always a continuous visual corridor through the storage Ts on a standard 9 grid. And above each of the storage Ts, because we're at different heights in the elevation, we have a wood clerestory to make up the difference of this angled roof above. Once you're within the home, again, you can see all the way through it, and then the Ts are organized at different angles, so there's always a view or an experience that there's a room beyond. In the kitchen, the counter of the storage T is lowered to accommodate a counter. And then we introduce skylights so that at the deepest parts of the home, we're still bringing in natural light. From the kitchen, there's a view into the bedroom beyond with the sliding door. And then from here, you can see into one of the storage Ts where all of the wet spaces or storage is held. And here, this is the bathroom beyond. This is an image of the living room within the house. And then there are a variety of more distinct enclosed porches or more open porches throughout the home. And then this is an aerial view of the home. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.